Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Between Two Cities Essential Edition from Stonemaier Games. Between Two Cities is a 1 to 7 player game of working together with your players on your left and your right to build a city, the best possible city, and you do want to balance out how you build those cities because of the fact that you're going to score points equal to your lowest city. You want to build a great city with him and a great city with her, and together between the two of you, if your points are worth 71 over here and 68 over here, well, your score is 68, and so it is in your best interest as you play this game to balance and ensure that you are spreading your focus as evenly as possible. But that's okay because so are they, and so is she, and so is everyone at the table, because everyone wants to ensure that they're building cities that work for them on their left and their right. You'll grab a stack of tiles, you're going to go ahead and look at those tiles, you're going to ultimately select 2 tiles that you think work best for you, and then from there, once all players have done so, you're going to go ahead and reveal those tiles and choose which of the cities to place these in, because one tile will go on the city on your left, one tile will go on the city on your right, but it's at this point that you can try to figure out exactly what and how you want to do it. You can even change your mind from your intended original decision, which you might want to do so because maybe you thought that this was the perfect tile for your city, for one of your cities, but the player you're working with also chose a tile and now it's no longer the best choice. So you do have the option to rearrange and pick what you want, but ultimately you're going to be picking these tiles and putting one into 2 different cities. When you do so, you're going to have to make sure that every tile eventually is connecting to other tiles. There are these roads. You see, you have these little terrain boards, and you are building out a 5x5 city as you play. So the terrain board is 3x3, but you're going to be building out around the terrain board. This could be the bottom corner of your terrain, slowly building out more and above that, or you could have it as a center terrain, moving out one in each. How you build it is up to you, but you're building a 5x5 city, incorporating the terrain board and the blockages on it into the city that you're building. You're going to go ahead and try to do this in order to grab the various tiles that you think will score most effectively, because every single one of the tiles scores in different ways. You're going to have tiles that score for different types of tiles. You're going to have, let's go through some of these tiles over here so you can see them. I won't necessarily cover all of them. You're going to have houses that are worth points for having different types of tiles, but they don't want to be next to factories. So houses like to have variety in the cities, but they don't like to be next to factories, so you have to be mindful of that. You're going to have businesses that are going to score more and more points the more businesses you have, whether they are touching or not, but also get an additional point for being next to places where you can go ahead and eat. So you have that. And these all, the iconography, all of these is on the tiles. It's very small. It serves more as a reminder if you already know what's going on, or of course you can check the rulebook. You're going to have these special tiles over here that always want to be next to 2 types of tiles and don't want to be next to another type of tile, and they'll score accordingly either 1, 3, or 6 points depending on how well you accomplish that goal. You're going to have the various food outlets over here where you can go ahead and get up to 17 points, 1, 4, 9, or 17 points for having different types of them in your city. We have our factories, which factories score points based on, or businesses, factories, whatever they are, score points based on who has the most of them. Depending on how many you have, you score more points for each one. If you have the most of these, you're going to get 4 points for each one. If you have the second most, you get 3 points for each one, and anything else gets 2 points for each one. You're going to have parks, which score for having a connected grid of parks. Ideally, you're going to get 2, 8, and then 12, 13, 14, etc. points. In other words, parks will slowly escalate up until you have 3. 3 parks that touching each other are great. More than that, not as great because they're only 1 point each. So big parks are good, 2 big parks, not so good. To be clear, that's too big as in like T-O-O big, not like too big. But you're going to score through those over there. I think those are most of the tiles that we've covered. I believe most of the tiles. There might be one other that I did not get to, but each of these tiles you're trying to figure out how they're going to go into your city and how you're going to build out a grid that rewards you for what you're trying to get done. So you're trying to choose these tiles and you're trying to do so while working with the other players on your left and your right to build out the best cities possible. In the second round of play, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and draft these larger tiles. So same basic idea, but now you're drafting 3 of these larger tiles, and you're going to go ahead and pick these tiles, looking at them over here, picking 2 that work for you. Let's say we pick those 2. This one will be discarded. And then again, once everyone reveals, you'll choose which city to place them in, making sure to keep the correct orientation of those tiles. Third round, we'll go back to having a stack of these tiles over here, at which point you'll go to the end of game, the scoring, and you're also going to score, depending on if you use this is a module, but you're also going to score for whoever has the most of certain tiles within their district. More specifically, you're going to have distributed at the beginning of the game 2 cards to each of District 1, 2, and 3, and the combination of those cards will potentially score you first and second place points for those cities. So for example, a grouping of green and blue tiles within your city, a grouping means connected blue and green, although you don't need green by itself and blue by itself. It just means literally a grid of blue and green together. Whoever has the largest grouping of that will score 8 points. Second largest will score 4 points. And you're going to have that for 6 of the 7 tile types will be scoring for these groupings as you go through the game. You can do that. 3 rounds of play, draft tiles, draft middle tiles, draft the more tiles, add up your score, give the district scoring if you're playing with that, and that is basically Between Two Cities Essential Edition. The Essential Edition from Stone Mountain Games does incorporate some elements of the expansion and the base game from the original game, and it just bundles it all together in a newly released pack, and that brings us to the review, starting off with ease of play. Game is very easy to dive into. Rules are very quick, very clean. It's like a few pages of rules at most. There are some other aspects we are not diving into this review, such as the various solo modes you can dive into, a few ways you can incorporate different aspects as far as what elements of the game you choose to incorporate. But overall, very easy game to dive into. Plays in roughly 30, maybe 40 minutes tops. Accommodates 1 to 7 players. Table space is going to vary depending on how many players you have. Each player requires a 5x5 grid, so the more players, the more space, but not that intimidating overall. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, I'll start off with that exact aspect I just touched upon. The game teaches and plays ridiculously quickly. This is a game I can get you up and running. I mean, assuming you've played other games in general, I can get you up and running in 5 minutes. And if you haven't played games in general, it might take 10, tops 15 minutes. It is a quick and easy game to get people up and running. You're drafting tiles, you're passing those to left and your right. You're trying to place these down in your grid. There's adjacency you have to take into account. And then here's how these 7 tiles score. And then from there, we can go ahead and start the process of playing. So it teaches quickly, it plays quickly, it is highly accessible to a variety of player counts. That 1 to 7 players, again, the 1 and the 2 player mode will have differences in terms of how they play, but once you're at 3 players plus, you're basically just 3 to 7 players. It's just very accessible to a large degree of player counts with minimal degrees of trade-off as far as how the game goes. Lower player counts will mean that you might see some tiles passed around to you again. Higher player counts means that you're going to see different tiles every single time, keeping the puzzle and engine fresh as you go through it. And the sense of collaboration. This is something I generally enjoy about Between Two Cities, as well as Between Two Castles from Stone Mountain Games. We'll talk about that later. But you have the sense of collaboration in the game. You're working with others. So sure, you're building out your city, and you have to be mindful of that, and you're drafting tiles, but you have that aspect that you're working with the players to your left and your right, or more specifically, if I'm over here, you know, we have this like this. I'm working with these 2 cities as we go through the game, and that means that there is a general sense of collaboration as you go through the experience in which you're trying to figure out how to get things done with other players. It feels like a team game, although a team game where you're the one who's going to score on your own. Other players will not score. You're ultimately trying to win yourself, but while doing so, even as you try to win yourself, you have to work with others. It's not semi-co-op though. You're all trying to optimize your score, and you're all trying to do the best thing possible as you go through this. And so that sense of collaboration is very present. I also like the terrain mats and the endgame scoring as well. Those take a simple puzzle, and it is very simple. It's very direct as far as what it's doing. It's not overly complicated, for better and for worse. It makes the game highly accessible, but can take away some of the depth of the experience. But then the player mats give you a nice little twist as far as how things are different game to game, as well as the district scoring will always give you a different puzzle as far as how to optimize. In one game, you might be going for this over that, but depending on how the district scoring plays out, you may have to find that, especially as other players are working with you on the draft, you have to kind of plan around things, and that working with people on the draft is a fun aspect to take into account. It's always tough when you're trying to draft things and you want 2 of something, but you have to understand that as you go through this game, you're always passing to someone who's working with you. Even though the rounds you'll alternate passing in terms of which direction, you are always passing a hand of tiles to someone else that wants to help you. And so taking that into account as you go through it, thinking these tiles would be great for the city, 2 of them, but I want both of them. Well, that's great, because you are going to be passing them to the player who still wants the best for your city, and so you have a lot of opportunities to take stuff like that into account as you play through it. As far as what I don't like in the game, first of all, is the low variability. Sure, we have the district scoring that kind of mixes it up a bit, as well as the player mat that mixes it up a bit, but the key word there is a bit. This is mostly the same game every single time, and it doesn't really change that much from game to game. That, combined with the fact that it's not a very high complexity game, means it's very fun, very accessible, very easy to dive into, but also is the kind of game that, at least for myself, is a little bit more doesn't hold up very well for very long. It is good, it is accessible, it's easy to dive into, but it just doesn't have the variety that I want to keep this game fresh 7 plays later. It is the kind, not because of the player count, just because I arbitrarily chose a number there, but it does have low variability to the overall experience. And additionally, the collaboration, as much fun as it is, also means you are dependent on the players on your left and your right as far as playing optimally. If you're playing a game, and even the player to your left or your right, if either one of them plays inefficiently such that they don't help you build a good city, well, then you're in trouble. Because you might have a city that's, a nice solid 73 points, but if your city to the left of you is going to be only 61 because they built a 102-point city on one side and a 61-point city on the other side, if they focus their energy and attention incorrectly on one city and left the other city to nothing, well, then you can lose this game through the fact that the person you're working with isn't playing optimally. The sense of collaboration is great when it's working, but it can be frustrating when you feel that losing the game is because someone else at the table played suboptimally and that you did everything that you possibly could have in your own best interests. As far as I can see others not liking, generally the goals, I think, these goals over here, when you're playing with them, they can absolutely make or break the game. You can play a game, a fairly tight game. If you're playing with other players, you're all trying to do the right thing, you know what you're doing, it can be a very tight experience that can very often come down to who got the bonus 8 points in a district. Those are one small element, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's something you're all working with, you're all taking into account. It's not the end of the world, but at the end of the day, if you are playing a tight game, it can come down to a chunk of 8 extra points that one person got over another. The goals is not always just a factor in the game. It can very much be the make it or break it once you're playing with people who know what they're doing. As far as final thoughts on Between Two Cities Essential Edition from Stonemaier Games, I like this one. I overall like this one. I played Between Two Castles, and I played Between Two Castles of Madkin Ludwig from Stonemaier Games, which is kind of a mashup of Between Two Cities, as well as the Castle of Madkin Ludwig. I played that before Between Two Cities, and they both provide similar and yet different experiences. I think Between Two Castles gives you a bit more complexity in the experience, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It gives you more reasons to dive into it again and again, but I think Between Two Cities is just accessible. It's just easy to dive into, it's accessible, it's a quick game that gives you what you want out of the experience, it plays quickly, it teaches quickly, it is a solid gateway game that works well at a variety of player counts. At the same time, the low variability and the low complexity means this is one that I like, but don't love. It's one that I'm happy to play, but not one that I'm often suggesting. It is a good gateway game that I very much enjoyed my time with, but from there, it's one that I'm just happy to play when it's suggested. For me, it's a 3.5 out of 5. I like what it does, I like some of the elements, it's quick, it's clean, it's accessible, but it does have a cap to just how rewarding the experience is. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, I highly recommend Tiny Towns. Tiny Towns from AEG. Tiny Towns from AEG will give you a high degree of a variety to the player count while also building up cities, not really working with others, doing your own little thing in a very different experience, but also a solid game. And then, of course, Between Two Castles. If you like Between Two Cities and you're looking to level up just the complexity involved, I think Between Two Castles and the expansion, I highly recommend the expansion for that as well. I think those will give you what Between Two Cities is giving you with a bit more depth to the experience. In any case, and until next time, I hope you found this video helpful. I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and as always, I hope you have a good one.